Well, it's time, so let's go ahead and get started. There's going to be kind of a lot of code, so I don't know if you'll be able to see from way out there very well, even though the font is kind of large, but I'd recommend you move a little bit closer. Oh, okay. Well, sounds good. So what we're going to talk about today is Azure Mobile Services. It's going to be an overview session, and we're going to just build, I'm going to build and you're going to watch, a brand new mobile service from scratch, and then code up your CRUD operations from scratch also in a view model. So of course, it's kind of a lot of code, so some of it I had to pre-build. Some of the UI is pre-built, but anything that has something to do with mobile services, we're going to write from scratch. So you're going to get a nice little overview of what that technology is all about. My name is Sergey Barsky, and I work for Tyler Technology. The technology is out in Atlanta area, and I've started using mobile services in my own app that I've been writing for like 6 months now, 2 minutes at a time, and I'm nowhere close to finishing. And it's all because my job keeps getting in the way of my hobbies, and I wish it was the other way around, but that's not obviously the case. So, what is mobile services? So it's one of the technologies that came to market fairly recently. And they're not the Azure Mobile Services, which Microsoft offering, is not the only offering in the area of what a lot of people refer to as BaaS, or backend as a service. And as the term implies, it encompasses some sort of API plus the persistence engine that you can subscribe to and pay some monthly fee of sorts. And then you define what it is you want to store, and you call their API and they'll store it for you. And of course you can call the same API and retrieve it. So Azure Mobile Services is one of those things. There are other offerings. I know Telerik has an offering. I don't remember, it's Live, Telerik Live or something like that. Almost identical offering. So the technology sits somewhere in the cloud, so available across the internet to all the apps. And you pay a fee and you use all that. So why would you want to use a technology like that? And it's primarily because it cuts out a lot of development time, and it makes it simple for you to store and retrieve whatever data you want to use. So I'm going to specifically have a demo how to use those from Windows Store XAML app, but you can consume the same services because at their core is just RESTful API across the internet. That's all it is, which means you can consume it really from any client. But the marketing positioned mobile services are specifically something you'd use with quote unquote mobile apps, or apps that you carry around with you on tablet or whatever, and you can consume whatever that data is across the internet. So that's what comes with value proposition of Microsoft Azure Mobile Services. You don't get to write a lot of code. So you still write your UI, but you really don't write any backend code. You don't write the database, you don't write services, you don't do any of that. So it'll cut out a lot of that mundane sort of work that you typically would have to do. As I mentioned, it's not specific to store apps. It's really cross-platform offering, meaning that you can consume them from iOS and Android and even the JavaScript client. And for all of those, Microsoft have written libraries. In other words, you have a wrapper, and in the case of JavaScript, a wrapper is kind of a loose word, but in case of all other technologies, you do have a client that you talk to that will translate whatever your code is, whether it's Objective-C or Java. It'll translate that code into RESTful API calls. So to you, it looks like you're talking to this database right here on your machine, where in fact you're consuming and issuing RESTful web service calls across the internet. So the advantage of that is that you can define that service once, and then you can write whatever app you write in many platforms and your backend doesn't change, which means your data is available on every client, no matter which client defined. So when it comes to value proposition, that's about it. So every value has a price, and I don't really want to skip that topic because I think it's important. If you want to use free hosting, which is available on Azure, you get some limited number of clients that can use that endpoint. And I think the limit is like a couple hundred, give or take. In other words, you can use a couple of hundred. So that's good enough for development. It's probably not good enough for production. So the next tier up, which I think maybe 10,000 client, quote unquote, client licenses or client access, that tier goes to around, I think, $30 for shared hosting. Plus, you have to pay for whatever the database storage you're going to, because it's backed by SQL Azure database, or what they used to be called SQL Azure, but now it's some other marketing name. So it has its own cost. So those $30 are on top of what you pay for database. If you don't have a lot of data, you can use free 10 meg Azure database. Again, this is plenty good for development, likely not good for production. And the next tier, I think, is around, next tier is a web edition, 1 gigabyte, which I think is between $20 and $30 a month or so. So you can do a production maybe for $50 or so. And I'm not sure if you've seen the recent promotion that Microsoft is running, but they keep advertising that if you have MSDN license, you already have certain number of dollar equivalents of hours, compute hours, that you can use. And their vision is to use for development and testing, though they say that they're not going to keep you from using it in production, just not their intention. So if you have MSDN license, you probably want to look on your MSDN subscription site. It'll tell you, there should be a link there that says Azure benefit or something like that, and you can sign up and you can use it. If you want to test it, you really don't even have to give them a credit card anymore. So if you want to start developing, you can develop for free. Once you go production, you do have to pay. So key features that you get, obviously it's a flexibility and pay as you go model, meaning the more you use, the more you pay, essentially. So you only pay for what you use. As far as storage is concerned, it's a SQL Azure, meaning that you don't need to worry about backups and all that stuff, and your data is maintained in triplicate typically. So there has to be some major disaster for you to lose your data. And of course, if 1 gig is not enough, you can keep growing. Some of the recent features that got added that I think add more value to it is the blob storage integration, meaning that if your app is set up to upload videos or images or sound files, you don't have to use up very expensive database to store them. Instead, you can use blob storage, which is a few cents a month for 100 meg, I want to say. So it's just like literally for $1 you can have a gigabyte. Whereas the same gigabyte of SQL Azure is more like $30 a month. So it's many, many times cheaper. You can have push notifications out of the box, and you can secure your services through some whatever authentication model you want to use. In my demo, I'll use Facebook, but you can use any of the major providers like Google or Microsoft or Facebook or Twitter. And on top of that, there is some variety of third-party clients you can also sign up to. In my demo, I'll just use SendGrid, and we'll try to send an email. Hopefully that'll work. And in addition to that, there are some other, I don't remember all the add-ons, but there are other add-ons. And some of the newer features that got released with an RTM is something called batch jobs. And scheduler is in preview right now, so which means you don't get SLA with it. But it allows you to do, what allows you to do is schedule some repetitive tasks, and they'll run on whatever periods you need. On top of that, there is a custom API, meaning that you can define a custom endpoint and define what you want to do at that endpoint, and you can send that message, and whatever your code is going to do, that's what it's going to do. So it goes beyond the CRUD, which is what I'm going to show you. And of course, at the end, you have to you can customize all the server-side code, even though it works out of the box, but it is customizable. And while we're at it, I want to mention that mobile services are built on top of Node, so the code that you customize is going to be JavaScript. And I'll show you a little bit about that. So now, I think the slides are gone, so the rest of the time, we're going to step through and code a brand new mobile service. And we're going to start with the Azure portal. So once you log in, all you have to do is create a new service. Mobile service create. I'm going to copy the name because some of the stuff I've pre-set up, like Facebook integration, and that's because it's taken quite a few minutes for it to propagate across the internet. So all I have to do is use the name that I used last time. That way Facebook integration will work. Then I'm going to use free database, Eastern region. Then it's going to prompt me for a database name. I'm not going to manually ever refer to it, so I don't really even need to write it down. Well, I should write it down because I can access SQL Server directly. And it takes it maybe 2 minutes to create. So what's going to be created for me is the endpoint, which is the service itself, plus the database. Of course, no tables, because I haven't really defined any tables yet. So the next thing that we want to do is add a table. So I'm going to copy the table name here so I don't create some typos. And once it's done, I should be able to drill into the details, and we'll see some of the options that are available. And some of those I already talked about, like security and push notification. So we'll take a quick look at those next. And I wish I had Jeopardy music, but I don't. But literally it takes like a minute usually. Now that I said it, it's probably going to take half an hour, as it always does. So what we're going to do next is create a table and define whatever my key is going to be, which is going to happen automatically. And then we're going to start coding the client itself. And while we wait, we'll just go ahead and get started. So to talk to a client, there are only few things that I need. So you can add a NuGet package to Azure Mobile Services. They'll pull in or whatever it is you need to work on. Alternatively, you can download the sample app that is kind of poorly written, but it shows you how to create a client and what the parameters are. So in my case, the client is going to be the mobile service name, which is mobile contacts. And the key I have to look up. Oh, it's done finally. So once I go to details, that's part of what I talked about. You can download the sample app for Windows Store, Windows Phone 8, iOS, Android, or HTML. And under dashboard, there should be mobile service URL, which is what I typed in. And in the bottom, I need a key. So what I want to do is just simply copy this key and paste it into my code. And key is my private key that allows my client to access the endpoint. So this is the overall security around the endpoint itself. So let's flip back to the browser. Close that. And now what we want to look at next is some of the configuration options. A couple of things are kind of interesting. One option is called Enable Dynamic Schema, which is a fancy word for allowing mobile service runtime itself create the structure for you. So all I have to do is create a table. I don't put any columns into it, but based on the class that I define to be stored in that table, it'll automatically create the schema to match it. And if I alter the class, then it'll alter the schema. So that's one of the options. The other option is the identity, and that's where my Facebook authentication, for example, is going to go, or Microsoft, or Twitter, or Google. In my case, I'm going to use Facebook. And the last thing I want to do is just start coding, so we'll create a table. As I mentioned before, the only thing I need to do really is give it a name. And now there is we can see that there is also security that is based on the table. So it has all the CRUD operations in there, and then you have a few options. So you can have anybody with application key, which means literally that's your app. And that's the key that I just pasted in. Alternatively, you can make it completely public, which means everyone. Or you can secure it by a login, such as Facebook, and that would be authenticated users. Or you can have that table for internal use only, and that's what the last permission is all about. So I'm going to leave the defaults in place, and I will create a table. And if I look at the details of the table, of course I don't have any data, and the only column I have is ID column, whenever it eventually paints. And that's the primary key column that's defined for me automatically. But see, I haven't done anything else. So let's go ahead and code some CRUD operations here, including some properties I'm going to bind to. So there are two things that I need to store table data. So I have mobile services table, which is an abstraction against my table. And I don't need to put that on a property. I'm not going to bind to it. For the actual binding, I need a different type. So I have mobile services collection, and this one is also strongly typed. And we're going to call it contacts. And I do need to actually convert it to the one with back in field. So I'll go ahead and do that right quick. The idea is that I need to raise notify property change events, which is specific to Windows Store apps. Whenever my collection is populated, I need to make sure that property change events are raised. And to do that, I use a base class that comes with notify collection base class that comes with store apps. So if you create a brand new app, then you will have that set property method, which is in my base class as well. So this will allow me to fill in the data, raise notification, so my data will be bound to my UI property. And that's really the only code we have to write. Now we need to fill in the data. So that's our next step. So table is going to be my client, and I forgot the variable name. There we go. So this is going to be client, and I'm going to get the contact table, and that's all I got to do. So now my table is going to be used to push the data to my database. And to populate my UI, I'm going to use contacts, and I'm going to use table and use toCollection async method to retrieve the data. And I need to await it, and that part is specific to Windows Store apps because it's built on top of .NET 4.5. So my async await keywords are there, And what that results in is just cleaner code that I have to write versus subscribing to end retrieve event or whatever else. So this is the easiest way to get around it. So now I can actually run my app. Of course, I don't have any data in a database, so nothing is going to appear. So to see something to appear, we need to fill in some details. So let's start with the save. So I have something pre-built in here, and it's a very simple schema that I'm going to use. I'm going to check the contact ID being 0. That's how I'm going to know if it's a new record or an existing record. You can add is new property or do whatever else you want to do. This is just a simple way for me to do things. And I'm passing in, because I'm using MVVM, I'm passing in this contact as a parameter to my command method. And raise your hand if I lose somebody along the way, because I'm trying to mostly concentrate on mobile services, not really on how to write MVVM app Windows Store. So raise your hand and I'll slow down and I talk about details. So in this case, I have my contact. I know if it's a new or existing, so I need to push it out. And this is where table variable of whatever my type is comes into place. This mobile service table. And it has some methods in here that I also need to await, because they obviously are synchronous because they go across the internet. So if it's a 0, I need to do an insert, pass in the contact. Now there is only one thing I have to do after this, assuming this succeeds. But if not, that's why I have try catch around it. You can't really assume that your connection is alive at any moment. But now that I've created the record, now I need to synchronize my UI with my database. So this is my last step. I need to add it to my collection that I'm binding to UI. I only need to do that for insert. For update, because my server side doesn't modify any properties, I really don't need to synchronize anything. I simply need to await update async contact. So this is my insert/update. So you can probably guess what will happen if I write delete. I'm just going to take this code, and this will give me a head start on delete. If it's a brand new one, I obviously don't need to send the command to the service to delete it, because I haven't inserted it yet. So in case of a brand new record, I just need to remove it from my collection. And in case of existing record, I'm awaiting delete async. So far I've written maybe like 12 lines of code, but it supports now all operations on one table with whatever properties I have. So I should be able to run this app now and have it work. So let's give that a try. And there is something I want to copy, which is a URL to a random picture I'm going to insert, because it'll be an easy way for me to know if things work. Okay, so they did, which is good. So now what I want to do is insert a row. So I don't have really any data in there. And let's stop this and debug it right quick. Oh, it's sitting at breakpoint. That would explain why it didn't finish. There we go. So now I'm going to add a row. I'm going to just simply fill in all the fields. So in this case, I only have 4 fields in here, and I'm going to invoke save command, which will end up in my view model on my save. I didn't have a breakpoint here, but on save should invoke here and should have inserted the row. So we'll see in a minute if that works. So it inserted the row. So now we want to see what happened on the server. So let's flip back to the browser, and now let's take a look at columns again. because I had dynamic schema enabled, I should see my columns added to my structure. So I added first name, last name, and favorite picture. Of course, at the same token, I should be able to browse the data and see one record in here. Hopefully, assuming that everything actually worked. So here is the data that was added. Any questions so far? So this is how simple it is to actually implement CRUD operations. And by that, what I mean is that the actual code to write, to store the data was minimal. Of course, I have to write all the UI in there, but that's kind of besides the point. What I'm trying to kind of illustrate here is the value proposition that you get by just storing the data. So now let's work on the next thing. So let's try push notifications. So push notifications is something that adds a little bit of pizzazz, I guess, to your app. It gets it to be more interactive for the user. So to do push notification, there are only a few things we have to do. And of course, push notification is built into mobile services itself. It's not a third party or any of that. So to configure push notification, I have to flip to push notifications tab, and I have to get what's called a secret and a package ID. So to get the package ID, you have to register your app in Windows Store. And you really don't even have to have app written to register. You simply go to the page. You have to have a developer account, obviously. But you go to development page, and then you enter a new application. You provide at the minimum you need a name. And you can just save it off and come back to it later. But you need that to be able to set up push notifications. To set those up, you have to click on another link that will pushes you to a live developer website where you can add, it's going to have that application in it, and then you can configure under identifying your app and authenticate your service. I mean, you can enter the package identifier that's going to be generated for you and a secret. And those two things that I need for push notification. So I'm going to just copy it, and that way I don't create any typos. So I'm going to go to mobile services. Here's my package ID, and then client secret. So I need these two things for Windows-based push notifications, which is Windows Store app is Windows app. So I'm just going to save that. Now the next step, because it's a brand new app, I need to let the Windows Store know that this app that I entered under my developer account is the same app I'm developing. So the easiest way to do it is to go to your application UI and go to project and store, and then you can associate app with the store. So what that is going to do, force me obviously to sign in with my developer account, and I'm just going to use my personal account for this. And after I sign in with my developer account, it's going to look up to see what apps I have registered in the store. So this AWA app is the one that I entered for my demo, and then I just click associate. Alternatively, you can open this giant XML file and start typing, which is really annoying. So instead, I'm just going to associate with the store, which will pull in the package ID and associate my app with mobile services via that package ID. Because I entered the exact same package ID, just to recap, into my app, but also into Azure Mobile Service. So that's how they can do handshake. They have the same package ID, and they share this client secret. So that's how they can talk to each other. And the last thing I have to do is go to my manifest file And under all image assets, out of all places, I have to enable toast notifications. Not really sure why it's under images, but that's what it is. So toast capable, that's under notification. That says I'm enabled for push notifications. They're gonna come into my app, and depending on what format I'm using, they'll pop up in my UI. So to do that, there is one thing I have to do, and I have to create a notification channel. Push notifications go through this layer in your Windows Store app called push notification channel. And what you have to do is register the channel with the operating system, and then the operating system is going to start pushing messages through that channel. So let's go ahead and create one. It's going to be push notification channel. And I'm just going to call it channel. And now I have to create it. So I'm going to do it in my init method. So I can say channel equal push notification channel manager, create push notification. So I have two ways to consume push notification. One is in-app, which is what I'm going to do. And the other one is for live tiles. So if you support live tiles, you can send the same notifications to your live tile. So in my case, I'm going to opt for in-app notification, and I need to await it, just like everything else. And now I'm going to set a breakpoint here, and for one thing, the way push notification channels work, it assigns this ginormous URL, this really long random URL. Somehow that URL needs to make its way to the cloud, and you need to save it somewhere in the database, or you can just consume it right away, depending on what your goal is. But that channel needs to be available in the cloud. So a couple of ways you can do it. You can have just a table that holds channels. So you can create a channel table, use the same mobile service table of channel table, and just push that row in there. And then in your insert method or in your batch API, you can pull that data back out and send push notification. Because we're a little bit limited on time, instead of going through all these steps, I will cheat a little and write down that notification channel URL and simply paste it into my code that will send notification channel. So it'll become pretty clear in a second. So let me run that, let it come up. Takes it a second, and now if I highlight over my channel, one of the parameters is this URL, which I'm going to simply just copy. And now I need to update my UI. So to update my UI, I need to modify my script. In my case, I'm just going to modify the script that inserts the row. It'll be clear in just a minute. Let me flip back to the browser and go back to mobile services, data, and in my case, I'm simply just going to put it on an insert of a content, or a person in this case. Remember how I was talking about Node.js? One of the methods that is pre-built for me, which I haven't touched yet, is the insert method. So this will fire whenever I call an insert on my mobile services table for a content. So I'll fire this. Right now, all it does is default operation, which simply inserts a row into context table. Now what I'm going to do is replace it with this. So you saw a minute ago that I just pasted this channel, which again, like I said, is cheap. And you have to push it in some other way. And after I do the standard operation, which is a request execute. So I'm still calling the default. But on the success of that, which will, a function that I'm passing in success means that after my insert successfully executes, I'm going to do something else. And in my case, I'm doing the request.respond, which is something you should do to return the control back to the client. In other words, push notification send may take, I don't know, half a second. If you wait for that to occur and then return, then your client is a little more slow. So instead, I'm going to return control right away and then issue the notification. And then there is a very nice write-up on Microsoft MSDN side for Metro stores that describes all the tile formats. There's, I think, 16 of them. I'm just picking one at random that just does text. You can also do pictures, you can do 2-3 lines, you can do one-liners. So there's a whole variety. You obviously don't get any IntelliSense here in this editor window, which means you have to look up those methods and then copy it in, which is what I did because there's no way I can remember all that. So this specific format of a tile notification just takes one parameter, which is the name. And in my case, I'm simply saying this is the item that I got inserted, which is what comes into my insert method. So this is just a JSON that corresponds to my content object. And all I want to do is insert it and then signal to the user that such and such item was inserted. So I'm going to save that. And save takes, is immediately deployed essentially. So whatever you save immediately goes to production. Now if I come back to my app, I'm going to insert another row here. And I'm going to click save and just going to continue here. And here's the push notification that came in with what I just deleted. So it seems like it's no big deal, but it makes your app nicer and it doesn't take that much effort when all said and done. And of course you can do exact same code, say from your batch jobs, which I didn't talk about, but you can create a JavaScript that runs in a batch, pulls some data out of your database, and maybe sends push notification. So you can set that up, they'll run on some periodic basis, and send message to all the clients. Again, for that, whenever your app starts up, what you should really do is have a table called channels, and treat it just like a regular table. It only has one column, which is the channel push notification channel URL. And as soon as your app starts up, you create a channel and you push that data. And then, so your batch job can pull it back in and push notifications to each one of those URLs. And those are going to be specific to each instance of your running app. Any questions on that? So, let's talk about authentication. So the data is saved, we can see it out in the cloud now. So let's talk about authentication and security next. So I'm going to implement Facebook authentication, and as I mentioned before, all you have to do is pick whichever provider you like. Of course, you don't have to pick one. So the app I'm working on, I'm actually implementing all 4 that are supported. So a user that starts up the app can click on one of the 4 buttons and log in using any of the 4 providers. Facebook right now would support a Facebook, Twitter, Google ID, and a Microsoft ID. So to use the authentication, you have to create an app. In case of Microsoft, you have to register for security, register with your Live SDK. For Facebook, you have to create Facebook app. For Google, you have to create Google app, and they'll issue you some kind of a ID and some kind of a token. They essentially all work the same way. So if you look at my Facebook app, which is the app I created for this demo, you'll see ID, which is right here, app ID, and app secret. And literally, they all work the same way. So to make my app work with Facebook authentication, I have to take my app ID key, go back to my mobile services, go to identity, find the right section, which is Facebook in my case, and paste in my app ID, and then close your eyes, and we're gonna do the app secret here. And of course I can reset it anytime, and paste in my app secret. So the process for each one of those is the same. Because if you have millions of requests, then whoever that authentication provider is, they may talk to you and say, well, you have this free account and you're costing us 17 servers a day to process your request. So they all have some sort of a limit. So if you get extremely popular, you'll probably have to talk to them and figure out how you're going to pay for the services. But for a handful requests, they'll never bother you. So here's what I did for Facebook. What is interesting here, which is really interesting, is that the entire authentication scheme is implemented in mobile services, not in my cloud. So unlike push notifications or associating with a store app, I don't have to do any of that because I'm talking to the client, which is the proxy, mobile services client class. Whenever I tell it that I want to log in, it's going to contact server-side code and figure out who to call, Facebook in my case, or Microsoft or Google, and pass in the secret and pass in the app key and log me in, which will create the token from that specific provider. And that token will travel to mobile services client with my requests, and that's mobile services server, and that's how my server knows that I'm authenticated, because it sees that secret, that token that came from the provider. That makes sense? So it's kind of a jump, come back, and we know who you are kind of a thing. The reason I did all four of them in my app, is because you're required to write exactly one line of code for all that. And that's the reason that I would say there is no reason for you not to do them all, because you're not talking like a ton of code. So mobile services client, which is what I'm passing in into this method, which I haven't called yet, but I will in a second. Mobile services client, and I'm going to call login async. And the parameter that I have is the authentication scheme I'm using. So if you have four login buttons on the front page of your app, you just figure out which button they clicked on, and that's the provider you're going to pass in. So in my case, I'm using Facebook, and I'm going to trap the value in current user, and just like anything else, you have to use async await. All those APIs, they're all awaitable, task-based, 4.5, .NET 4.5 API. So the last thing I want to do is actually call this method, which I'm going to do in the init right here. So I'm going to take all this and uncomment this code and paste it all in here. And all I'm doing is calling authenticate method, which is what I just wrote. So this is one line of code. So now we just have to see if that works. I'm going to put breakpoint here, and you'll see the UI. As you notice, I didn't write any UI to support Facebook logins, because the UI is implemented by mobile client. So this is what happened when I put in this one line of code. It prompts me for my Facebook login. So let me pull in my credentials, click login, and if the internet cooperates, it goes through. So if I look to see what my current user is pointing to, it's a generic user, and so I have authentication token, which is a Facebook authentication token. And the only reason I know that I'm using Facebook authentication because there is a Facebook, and the ID is actually Facebook client ID. So if I go to my profile, that's the ID I'm going to see. So now that my service has been authenticated, so login and retrieval of data still works. What I can do now, which would be a good idea, is go to my table and go to permissions. And if I'm going to force users to log in, then I can just change this to only authenticated user, and that gives me a little bit more protection. Or you may have public areas in your app and private areas in your app that require login, and then you have to leave it as anybody with application key, or you can have some table with one scheme and some with the other. So you have a variety of options when it comes to securing your application. Any questions? Sure.
If your app has a login page that you collect login information and pass it back to the service behind the scenes, I'm thinking the same thing, right? You would do it programmatically. Instead of the login page that is down from the service coming in, if the app were to have a login page.
Yeah, you can implement obviously your own login. And you can even implement your own Facebook login if you want. But this is sort of like a shortcut to where you have to write a lot less code for some common scenarios. This is not the absolute replacement. Like, you don't have to go this route. And so just for experiments, I did write like a small sample code how to implement Facebook authentication from Windows Store app without this. But you have to write significantly more code, is what I'm saying, what I'm going to say. And if you notice where we're going with it, we're going toward writing less and less code. So mobile services provides some functionality for you that lets you write less and less code as you go. And so this is just one example, and the fact that I don't have to define schema is another one. So all I have to do is really just create a table that matches the class, and if I don't want to match names, I can use JSON attributes to modify the names in between, so I can add like a translation layer. But usually there is no point in doing it because you're the one who's writing. Of course, I don't know if I mentioned it, but the database is just a plain SQL Azure database, which means you can write website totally separate from your store app that will pull the data from that exact same database, because it's not tied to your mobile service in any way. It's just a standard database with a standard connection string you can access from any application, which means you can write like a supplementary website for your app where users can maybe see a dashboard. I don't know what the scenario might be, but you're not boxed in. So you're boxed in some cases, but you're not boxed in others. So the idea is that they want to give you out-of-the-box experience that lets you save the data, so storage. And everything else is like a add-on to allow you to write even less code. So the next question?
Have you tried Active Directory at all for authentication?
I have not. And I can't really educatedly comment on it.
I think you're still in beta. Today, there's talk by the team they will be supporting you in the next, I believe the next release cycle launch.
Let's see. Let me look at my list of features right quick. Let's look at the email. So to do the email, which I can't scroll all the way to add-ons easily. So there is an add-ons page. So I signed up for SendGrid, and SendGrid is the Microsoft partner that offers email services on Azure in general. And specifically, they offer their services also as part of their offering. They also offer them for mobile services. And it's implemented because it's all Node.js. They have a package that's automatically there for you if you sign up for that add-on. And once you sign up for SendGrid add-on, you can send emails from your application. So I'm going to start Outlook, and hopefully the email demo will work as well. And the idea is that you, just like toast notification, you define some place in your app where you want to provide emails to your users. And then all you have to do is code it. The only thing I'm going to say is that it's all JavaScript. And that's because of the platform that mobile services is running on. To set up email, like I say, you just find a script. In my case, I'm just going to use exact same insert script, and I'm going to paste it in again. And that's because I don't want to sit here and type the code that will likely have typos in it, very likely. And this is about the slightly more code that you want to write by hand. So I'm going to paste it in. I'm going to keep the channel though. Do I have a channel here? Yeah. So I'm going to take this code, push notification, paste it in. And the reason is, even though the app is something I'm going to restart, but push notification typically is not regenerated every time I run my app. So the same channel should work. And the other thing I want to show you is this. There is login facility that comes with Windows Azure Mobile Services. And it's familiar console dot something. In this case, there is a console.error and there is a console.info. And where you're going to see that is under mobile service itself, and under there should be a tab for login, and it disappeared. Oh, it's right here. It wrapped around so I couldn't see. So the logs is the last tab, and it already has some errors that were done. What is interesting, these are not the errors that I just did, which I didn't notice before, but because I recreated the app with the same name, it actually pulled the old logs, even though I deleted my last demo completely. But interestingly enough, the logs persist somewhere deep inside in Azure, and it pulled the same logs back into my new app. And so I haven't created that many errors quite yet. I'm sure I will with time. So let's see. I think I saved it already. So let's run this. I still have authentication enabled, so I'll have to log back in. But what you've noticed, I'm sure that to enable server-side functionality, I didn't have to change client code at all. And all I want to do is just test it, just to make sure that I didn't create any major problems here. Let's see. So the notifications still work. So now let's close the app. Go to dashboard here, and let's refresh the logs and see if it has the new message that I just sent. Let me expand. Whoops. Expand the last column. So today is Wednesday, and it's 3:23. So this is the message that just got logged, which indicates basically is because of where I put it, that I think I sent email without any problems. So if I look at my email, I don't know if it came in already. So here's the email that just came through at 3:25. So and the message that I had in my JavaScript code as well as login. So what login enables you to do is troubleshoot your problems a little bit easier with the console dot error warning info. Any of those messages will log to the log table. So let me flip back to the slides. So what we walked through was a new service, create a table. I didn't show you the download project, which I should have done. I just want to make sure we don't skip any major things. So under mobile services, let me go back here, and contacts, you can download like a starter app, and you can download any 5 of these, and they'll give you a basic demo that sort of works, assuming you create I think you need to create like a table that is hard coding into that demo, but I'll give you a bit of a head start. But like I said, I didn't want to do it because I don't think you get the right perspective on how you would write that code. Plus the code is all in like page and a code behind, which is something I don't personally like. But it does show you how to create a client, what to pass in as parameters, how to make insert, update, delete calls. And that's really all it contains. So it doesn't have any extra functionality that you saw, but it does give you sort of like a high-level code that you would need to write. So if you want to get started, just if you have an MSDN account, there is really nothing else you need to do. All you have to do is sign up for mobile services, and then you can code your service for free. If you don't have MSDN subscription, you can actually play for free. You get trial, 3 months trial, I think, right now, for free if you want to sign up. And so just making sure I didn't skip anything. I think we went through all the steps. If you want more information, there is a main site for mobile services, which is windowsazure.com/develop/mobile. And it'll give you an overview of how to write the code. I think it also has demos for other things like batch services, which are new, and even custom API, which I don't remember if that's shipped or not yet. One of them is in preview. I think scheduler is in preview, but everything else falls under SLA. So if you ever get lost, that site is very, very helpful. If you have any questions for me, here's my email address. Please don't hesitate to email me. I will post the slides on the project that we wrote today on my blog, either tonight or maybe sometime tomorrow, if you're interested. And I did record this session, which I put on YouTube, and it'll be a link to that as well. And any questions from anybody?
Is a developer account required only for push notifications? Otherwise, you don't need one?
If you want to develop for Azure, correct. You don't need a developer account if you just want to write a service. You can just write it without that. But if you want push notifications, you need one. If you want authentication, you need to link your app to Live ID or something. But you would need a developer account. Like for Facebook, you do need to sign up for a developer account. But it's free. It's not like it costs you anything. And create an app is also free, as I mentioned, until you hit like certain number of requests, and then they'll probably email you and try to figure out how you're going to pay for all that. But for a small app, I don't think you'll ever hit that limit.
Okay.
Any other questions? Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time.